It can be really challenging for a lot of people to start using data for making data-driven decisions. In the last 15 years, while I was working with my enterprise clients, I saw that they have a lot of this stuff figured out because they have large technical teams in place and they have a process in place. But a lot of medium-sized companies who are just starting with their journey, it can be a very challenging task for them to even know where to start. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to start simple with your data analytics. I'll break down how I built these analytics tools for the medium-sized companies. And best part about this way is that it's going to be simple and anyone can do it, and it's not going to require a lot of tools. Most of the tools you'll already have. One of the first things that I do is I sit down with my clients and I learn more about their business and how they want to use data to make better decisions. I really start to focus on what problems they have and how this data is going to solve their problem. One of the dashboards that I built early on was a proposal tracker. I worked with the proposal team to figure out all the information we were collecting about proposals and at what stage they were in, the likelihood of them winning the contract, how long it was taking to put the proposal together, what kind of teams were involved. So there's all sorts of information that was going into making one proposal. So we had to figure out how we can display some of this information. So maybe we can better allocate our resources and focus on the ones that have a higher probability and make smarter decisions using the information we have. We've defined our key questions. The next thing we do is we figure out what kind of information we need to display on the dashboard and reports that's going to help answer that question. Some of the information we might want to see here is how many proposals we have, how many potential leads we have. The more specific we can get with our question, the easier this part becomes because we can directly take our data and see if we can answer this kind of question. And in this step, we want to make sure that the question we're asking can be answered and that question is actually going to make some sort of an impact and aligns with our business objectives. And majority of the times I'm working with clients who don't want to do complicated formulas or shouldn't need to do a lot of formulas just to get their results. They're focusing on the business, not trying to figure out how to use technology. The next tip I have for keeping things simple is use existing tools. In almost every case I've seen, people usually use Microsoft Excel, and in some cases they use Google Sheets. You can build a lot of dashboards, reporting, and automation within these two tools. My favorite tool that I've used, and it's free, is Microsoft Power BI. This tool is totally free to download for Windows computers, and you can download the desktop application. The nice thing about this is that it can let you do so many transformations on your data. It really connects well with lots of different types of databases, different data sources, both Excel and cloud data sources. So another project that my team and I were working on was looking at marketing related content that we had out there on a website. When I asked the business team that, hey, do you just have some sort of a database of all the content pieces that we put out there? They had nothing like that in place. So I just wrote some code to automate and scrape some of the data. The good thing about this was that we were able to get a lot of data and didn't have to do this manually. Now, the downside of this is the company may have changed different types of categories and started adding more tags to certain content that didn't always exist before. So now we have to go back and figure out how to do data standardization. This is where those transformations can be very helpful to put in place. And that's why I mentioned Power BI is a really good tool for doing some sort of data transformation. Let's say next month you get 10 more records, and now you have to go back through those 10 records all over again and figure out how to transform that data to make it into a structure that you need again. But if you've already done that in Power BI, transformational steps, automatically those rows get transformed into the new data format that you've put in place. So now you don't have to do that work over and over every single time. So this step is one of my favorite steps. I like to build a prototype. Given the data that I've received, I've looked through the data and I understand what the goal is. I understand what kind of business objective we are trying to align with. I like to make a prototype and get that in front of the business to show them everything we can answer from it and figure out what makes sense. This way, we can prioritize the questions we want to answer. We can figure out if we have all the data we need or if there's any transformations we need to make and what kind of calculations we need to put in place to answer some of those questions. So there's going to be a back and forth with the business. Once we've put those calculations in place, it's always a good idea to double check the math and make sure that everything is calculating properly. Then we can figure out what kind of information needs to be displayed at what level, who needs to see the information, what's going to be most important for them. One thing that I think is a little bit more advanced technique, but can be really helpful, is thinking about the process and the story that you want to tell with this data. Especially if you're building it for other executives, you want to show a before and after picture. Maybe you want to show this is how the company was doing before we put some initiative in place, and now this is how the company works. Especially if these reports and dashboards is going to answer some sort of a question that has to do with time. Like before we didn't do this process, then we put this process in place, and here's our data after we've put this process in place. So you can show a before and after picture. So you can start thinking about how you're going to craft your visualizations and how you're going to display that data to show the before and after picture. Always double check and triple check the functionality, make sure it's working right. We want to make sure the data that we're displaying is accurate. The next tip I have to keep things simple is make sure that you use just basic reports, things that actually answer the questions. Don't get fancy with anything. Use simple visualizations that everyone understands, especially your end users. This next tip I have is to put this information after it looks good and has been verified in front of your users and test, gather feedback, figure out what is working, what isn't, and if they had any questions during the demo, like what does this chart mean? What is this showing? Take that feedback into account and see how you can make that better or more clear for the next round. I always like to walk my users through what I found during the analysis and building phase. So I'll walk them, hey, I noticed that this data looked like this and then it looked like that. Last year, there was some initiative. Here were the anomalies and here's what the trend looks like. So I'll walk them through the dashboard. So I help them figure out what that different visualizations means with some sort of a context in place. And if everything's looking good, just add small incremental changes. Don't change everything then for the next round, because then the end user has to learn it all over again. And one of the painful things that you can do is build out a dashboard, put this initiative in place, but it doesn't get used. We have to really figure out, is this really solving the business user's question? If it's not answering all the questions they have, or if we need more data, then we kind of gotta iterate and figure out how we can incorporate that in here. This strategy works really well for those medium-sized companies that may not have a lot of data sources. But as the business grows, there comes a time when we need to have all these databases in place, and we need to store the information, do transformation, have a data warehouse, integrate multiple data sources from various systems. So we need to make sure as our company grows, we store that data and we don't lose it if we change some of our tools. I also made another video on different levels of automation that you can put in place for different types of reports. That can be really useful if you're not just building dashboards, but you have to transform lots of data. You need to automate a lot of this kind of stuff so you don't have to do the transformations over and over again. And if you want to save yourself and your company a lot of time, I highly recommend you check out that video, and I will see you in the next one.